Welcome to this week's edition of Mob Talk. I'm Dave Stratweiser.
And I'm George Anastasia with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
George, more possible trouble for mob underboss Joseph Moussie Massimino, already in jail on a federal racketeering case with mob boss Joe Legambi. What's this problem all about?
There's a state investigation involving the sale of prescription medication and loan sharking, and it looks like the allegation is Massimino helped fund at least part of that network.
All right, George, we're both back from vacation and raring to go. Let's start with Massimino. Some tapes got played in federal court last week. What's that all about?
Yeah, it was a bail revocation hearing for an individual named Robert Cohen, who, according to state investigators, was close to Billy Andrews in that the sale of OxyContin and loan sharking operation. And in one of the tapes, he talks about how he made an offer to the feds in order to plead guilty, but he didn't disclose anything, and he was protecting the guy he needs to protect. That guy, according to the documents that are in court, was Massimino. And the allegation is Massimino funded a $57,000 drug purchase out at the airport, a sting operation that Cohen got arrested in. He had $57,925 on his person when he got popped. And the allegation is that money came from Massimino.
All right, now that's the mob allegedly dabbling in drugs here. We don't have any charges yet.
Right.
He hasn't been charged with that, but that ups the ante for Massimino. He could be facing a lot more time, and he's a alleged career criminal here.
Yeah, substantially. I mean, this changes the dynamic. If this becomes a separate case or if it becomes part of the racketeering case, I think it enhances the charges against Massimino. He's already looking at a lot of time anyway. And this goes back, I mean, the main player in that is a guy named Billy Andrews, who we talked about before. Andrews did 12 years on a meth dealing conviction back in 1998. He was connected to Louis Torah and that group way back in the day. So, this is an ongoing kind of South Philadelphia wise guy, wannabe wise guy, hang around wise guys. And Andrews and Massimino, who have always been friends, and I think the State Attorney General's office, which has generated a lot of the information we're talking about here, is building a case that focusing on the sale of oxygen.
All right, I always like the details, the skullduggery that goes into planting these wires. Where are these wires at, from what you can tell?
I mean, what we know from the one court hearing is that there was a bug placed in Billy Andrews' Mercedes-Benz, and that they were taping, and apparently they were taping for at least a month. They had a wiretap on his phone, but they also had a bug in his car. And I think one of the things that comes out of this with this disclosure last week is anybody who was in that car has got to wonder now, what was I saying? What was I doing? Did it get picked up on tape? Am I going to have a problem?
Okay, let's tell me what kind of problem this means for Massimino. He's looking at a lot of time already. They're looking for cooperators. He's not the cooperating type at all. He's the stand-up guy, do my jail time guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think given his track record, and he's got an extensive record of arrests and convictions, he was already looking at probably more time than anybody else in this case. If you layer a drug charge on top of that, it could potentially be a life sentence for this guy. He's 61 years old. So a substantial sentence of 30 years or more, that's life. And I think the stakes just went up substantially for Massimino. I don't know that any of this overlaps on any of the other defendants in this case, but it does go to the racketeering enterprise that he was a part of.
Okay, but does it make him cooperate?
I doubt that very much.
You didn't answer my tough question.
Massimino's had so many chances to cooperate in the past and never has. I just don't think it's part of his nature. I don't think we see him cooperating now.
All right, George, switch gears for me, too. Steve Mondevergine, a.k.a. Gorilla, former president of the Pagans, pled guilty also recently on some charges. Where's that put him?
Yeah, he pled guilty to an ag assault and weapons charges in the incident with Timothy Casual Flood that happened back in 2008. He's looking at he's been sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison, so it puts him in a state prison for at least the next 3 years, probably a little bit more. That was a development at the eve of his trial. He was supposed to go on trial for that assault. If you remember, Flood testified that Montevergine burst into a Pagans clubhouse up in Northeast Philly, shot him in the knee, stabbed him in the back, and that's what that was about.
All right, does this put to rest all the buzz we were hearing that maybe Gorilla might cooperate, that he might have some information on the mob and violence and things like that? That put that all to rest?
I think Gorilla's got that kind of information, but I don't think there's any indication he's going to cooperate. I saw him in the hearing, and he's I think resigned to what it is, and he's going to do his time. I think the interesting thing that spins out of this is this Timothy Casual Flood is clearly cooperating with authorities now, and I think he's a guy who could provide some information about some of the violence in that biker underworld back in 05, 06, including the murder of Thomas Wood.
All right, now I'm told by my sources that Flood's information is strictly who's who in the organization, and if he's in the grand jury testifying, he's talking about semantics, not too much about the murder of Tommy Wood or any of those other things that we've looked at in the past. And he's kind of strictly a who's this guy, that guy, what's the relationship kind of guy.
But that raises an interesting question. If the feds want that in front of a grand jury, clearly they want it because they're building a case, and they've probably got information already to help bring that case. It was indicated to me that the feds and the FBI is investigating the murder of Thomas Wood. So whether Flood can give them chapter and verse of how it went down, or simply give them a backdrop, it's of value.
I'm not arguing with you here. I mean, we all got sources. We all do what we do. He's a setup guy.
Yeah, and you know, we see that again and again in racketeering cases. You need somebody to set the table, to lay out the organization, to put the players in the different positions, and Flood is in a position to do that, if nothing else.
And he bring in the big witness behind him, and he lays it out.
There you go. I mean, and I think it's clear that the FBI is hot on this case. Whether they're ready to bring any charges remains to be seen, but they want it.
And I know Tommy Wood's family for a long time has wanted to see that murder solved. Happened like 5 years ago, and unfortunately it hasn't been solved.
Yeah, and that was the big pagans, Hells Angels. The Hells Angels are trying to establish a foothold in Philadelphia. The pagans balked, and there was a lot of violence.
And that helped drive the Hells Angels out of Philadelphia.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, George, let's wrap this up. We're hearing quite a buzz about a possible superseding indictment against mob boss Joe Legambi and others that are in jail.
Yeah, I think it's not a question of if, but when. I think we'll see it after Labor Day. Probably some cooperating witnesses and additional charges.
All right, that's it for Mob Talk this week. We'll see you next week.